military Keynesianism, the military-industrial complex, the devotion of massive resources to the military has unintended consequences that we refuse to acknowledge. That we are now spending close to $1 trillion a year, that's 1,000 billion, on our military establishment. This is not the defense appropriation that is published. That's simply the annual appropriation of the Department of Defense. It doesn't include the money spent on nuclear weapons. That's in the Department of Energy. It doesn't include the money spent on Veterans Affairs. That's in the Department of Veterans Affairs, including treating our wounded from Iraq. It doesn't include foreign military aid. That's in the State Department. It doesn't include the actual defense of the country. That's the Department of Homeland Security. Since after 9/11, we've discovered the Department of Defense has nothing to do with defense of the country. It's busying itself with warfare in outer space or some other lucrative, if useless, way to spend money. It all adds up to an unbelievable amount that is, over time, not sustainable. It reminds us of a famous remark by Herbert Stein when he was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors in Richard Nixon's administration. He rather famously said, "Things that can't go on forever don't." These things can't go on forever, and they're not going to. That is, the American empire could come to an end before this film is over if just one little thing happened. If Saudi Arabia decided that it wanted to be paid for its oil in euros instead of dollars. The agreement with the Saudi Arabians goes back to World War II when they agreed that oil transactions would be priced in dollars. There's no reason to do that anymore. The euro is a much more valuable currency. As an author, I am delighted to have royalties paid in euros. They're more valuable than dollars. And that if the Saudi Arabians simply did that before the evening was over, the American stock exchange would collapse, the backing for the dollar would end, and the dollar would become as useless as it should be in old-fashioned formal economic theory for a country with the world's largest trade deficits, year in, year out. And we would be in the same fix as Germany in 1923, China in 1948, Argentina in 2001 and 2, just a couple of years ago. It's bankruptcy is not funny. It's better than an atomic explosion. But you'll recall that German bankruptcy led at once to the rise of the Nazi Party. Chinese bankruptcy led to the victory of the Chinese Communist Party the following year. It would unleash in this country almost unimaginable pressures, often for revolution, once you wipe out the wealth of all of the society. And we're toying with that. We're threatening that with our fiscal imbalances, with George Bush's refusal to tax the wealthy, and with these expenditures that don't go anywhere. Military Keynesianism, they say, once you start creating jobs through the military, it's not Keynesianism anymore. Keynes never used the phrase himself anyway, but Keynes spoke of counter-cyclical spending, that is, in depressed times, using public monies to provide work for people who didn't have a means of sustenance, but that when full employment returned, then you taxed them and began to retire the debt. I guarantee you that you never go back on military spending. You never start cutting it off. I offer you again another anecdote. We're sitting here talking in the 50th District of California. This is the home of recently Congressman Randy Duke Cunningham, the Republican, who is now spending 8.5 years in federal prison for accepting bribes, openly advertised for, from defense contractors, a particularly cynical way of doing it. The thing that interests me about this case, though, is that well before the federal prosecutor in San Diego had gotten on to Cunningham and was preparing a case against him, I had written an op-ed in the LA Times pointing out that just from his submissions to the Federal Election Commission that he was bought and paid for by the military-industrial complex, that his biggest sources of funds were Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and as well as these small companies like MZM. The thing that interested me is that I got quite a few letters from districts like the 34th district in California, downtown Los Angeles, of people saying, God, I wish Cunningham were my congressman. I could use a good job. I don't mind making cluster bombs and using them to drop on innocent Lebanese children. That's what we do in America. We don't make much anything anymore, but we do make weapons and munitions, and they're good and they're really lethal. And that's what I need, is to get in on it. That the two mother hens of the Defense Facilities Subcommittee of the Senate Armed Services Committee are Kay Bailey Hutchinson of Texas and Dianne Feinstein of California. These are the two states with the largest number of military bases. And these two senators will do anything in their power to keep those bases open and functioning. They mean jobs for their constituents. I mention this simply to say how deeply military Keynesianism has penetrated our society and started to erode our democratic bases. That is, the compromises that we are now prepared to make in order to keep our head above water. To answer the question directly, why should we be concerned about imperialism and militarism? It's a suicide pact. That's the way empires end.